All right. Are we live?
Yeah.
We are. All right. I'm gonna finish sending out my last few invitations. Hello and welcome to a Teen Science Cafe, hosted by STEM Savvy with the South Dakota Discovery Center. My name is Isaac Rambo, and I am in 11th grade at TF Riggs. Next, we have Devin. He is a senior here, also part of our team. Ryan, our guest speaker tonight. Nevaeh, also a junior here at TF Riggs. And Jacob, also in our class. Our special guest tonight, as I said, is Ryan Brown, who works with satellites for the USGS and previously worked for NASA in mission control. Tonight, we are going to play a game of Among Us, and between rounds, we will compare the tasks and systems on the ship in the game to real life space exploration. We will also ask Ryan some questions about the work he does and what inspired him to go into the STEM related career. Please feel free to post questions or comments if you are watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. We will respond between games, and while you are watching, what things do you notice on the ship that will probably not really something you would find on a normal spaceship? Now, we will get into our first game of Among Us, which give us a little break, but if you'd like to join us, you can. We'll try and have as many people as we can. We'll fill up to 10 total. And in between rounds, we'll try to give other people a chance. So here we go.
Okay, Isaac, I better mention I got kicked for
Yeah,
so
the game lagged out due to too much time. So our code then for our mentors first is PJCABF. So we need 6 more people to participate. As soon as we get everybody in, we'll go into our first round, and then we'll get to our first round of questions. Say, Jacob, have you gotten it in yet? There we go. All right, we need 5
There we
more.
go. I'm in.
All right, 2 more. We're almost about to start. All right, 1 more. There we go. And let us begin. We'll be talking with you guys throughout the first few games, but we'll try to keep quiet during each round. So therefore, we don't ruin the immersion of the game. Like, one of the first things we're going to talk about ourselves is going to be about O2 and weapons. You have the leaves that you're going to be putting in and out, different, why would they be on the ship, other plant life on why it's here, or weapons. Why are we destroying asteroids and things of the such? Oh, it'll be interesting on how we do it. Or shields, for example. Why do we have this protection stuff? All right, first round of discussion. So, a lot of times we're going to ask where people are first. Me personally, I was over down in shields towards the end of the round.
I was an admin by admin.
For myself, I'm going to see where everyone else is at to kind of give a base ground of what's happening, everything now. See where I can figure things were at. Next, my own personal strategy is once you know where everybody's at, figure out where the body's at. So Darth was on their way to Nav, which, depending on where the body at, we'll figure out where things are at.
Where was the body?
I found it by electrical, like right outside.
So body was outside electrical. Well, why don't you put that in the chat?
Um,
And anonymous voting is on for those of you at home. We're going to have a little bit more of a challenge to give the imposters a little bit of leeway, even though some of them haven't played the game much before.
I have no clue, so I'm just gonna skip my vote.
Like, I'm going to say it could be orange, easily just because of where they were placed, since they did say they were by electrical.
Cyan or Ryan? 2 down.
And then we go back to tasks, which you can either go to either side of the map based on how you're running, and you kind of look out for things as you go. Like cams, they're a great way to access things and learn different things about people as they go through.
I was electrical this time.
I was in storage.
I hung out in security and went over to reactor.
Where's the body again?
They said it was an admin, which could have
Admin.
easily been someone in storage or somewhere in the other area. They are saying vote red, though.
Vote
So-
red. I have nothing against red, but I'll vote him.
Yeah, seems fair. But that's kind of the basic of the game, and we're going to work together to see what we can figure out here. Which means we could have got one imposter out, or we could have been wrong, and it could have just been a run-in and snipe. It'll be interesting on what happens next. And if you haven't noticed, this taskbar isn't actually going up that fast, which is kind of a shock. So if you are a crewmate, it'd be a good idea to figure things out.
I was by admin. Cyan ran away from light. Dizzy killed in dark on the way to lights.
Like, I did find someone there, but I
Easy.
saw Izzy on the way out when I was leaving. Medbay.
Gotta go with Daisy then. No hard feelings.
And basic ideas of the game. And since the game continues, that does mean we probably did mess up one of our votes earlier, which does kind of suck. Since now we can probably die.
Are both of them? Do we still have both imposters?
I know because the game would have ended already, so I would assume not. And messing up calibrations and stuff.
Med bay's
Bad
closed.
idea. And if we don't get O2 or something of this sort done early, you can easily die from, well, basically O2 poisoning. And that would be game. So our first round is done. And now we'll go back to our questions we have for Ryan.
Isaac, that was well played.
What?
Yeah, so my strategy there is get things out, try and put people down. But after round one, we do have some facts about weapons. So, weapons, currently, the ISS doesn't have lasers to break down asteroids, unlike the game. But they do have 2 guns in hand in order to defend themselves from any threat. 2 guns. Everyone who stays at the ISS is specifically trained to use the guns before they leave Earth. ISS has special shielding to prevent damage from small space junk, which a lot of times we have since we've launched so many satellites into orbit. And ground control tracks larger debris, anything greater than 1.5 centimeters, and helps ships maneuver around it using thrusters. And life support, like we used toward the end there, has different filters. So our O2 filters, which we had to turn back on to help clean through, is one of the tasks on the ship. So when you move those leads over, it's the O2 filters. How do leads get in space? Is it realistic? Well, in theory, yes, because we do need oxygen to breathe while we're in space, since we are humans, or aerobic creatures. By doing so, if you look inside there, there's a small plant in the jar, which helps provide oxygen to the entire ship. And the life support hasn't been as strong as recently, but in the past 40 years, it has developed quite a bit. From manufacturing and international support, it provides a lot of supplies and materials. Over the next 10 years, NASA plans on testing new technology and systems on missions between Earth and the Moon that could be used for longer space flight. And Ryan, we do have a question for you. What role does the mission control play in monitoring threats to the spacecraft, or crew, or life supports?
Oh man, it's all comes down. All that data comes down into the mission control room. So, as a flight controller, you're just sitting there. I personally had 6 different monitors, all of different temperatures and pressures and sensors and such, and you're just constantly monitoring that. And one of those monitors actually is what we call caution warning. And so, if any serious event is triggered, any of the sensors capture anything major, like a quick depressurization of the pressure inside the ISS, anything like that, those messages will come on the caution warning board and actually create alarms for the astronauts. So that's really the core of the flight controller job, is monitoring all that data coming down to try and keep the astronauts safe and the International Space Station still flying.
Makes sense. What inspired you to get into careers such as this?
I'll tell you what. Growing up in the Wyoming and South Dakota area, we don't interact at all. We don't have any space centers near us, anything like that. So I didn't even, and watching the movies, what you see on TV from NASA's, I literally thought that was like, if you're a savant or something like that, some crazy intelligent person, you're the ones that are getting those jobs. And surely didn't know anybody from this part of the country that was doing it. So I didn't even think it was possible enough to even dream of trying to get into those types of jobs, to be honest with you. It really, I didn't really click in that I could even strive for that until I was going to college at the School of Mines here in Rapid City, South Dakota. And SpaceX visited during one of the career days. And I just printed out, I had just gotten out of the military right before that, printed out my military resume and went up there. And I had spent about 45 minutes on their Wikipedia page on SpaceX, and this was early on. This was like in 2010, before SpaceX was so known, so nobody really knew who SpaceX was. But I spent like 45 minutes reading everything about it, and it seemed crazy that they were there at School of Mines, this space exploration essentially company, or at least they were trying to become that. And I just printed out my resume, immediately went home, put like a decent dress shirt on and stuff, and just went straight to them. Handed the lady my resume, and she's like, "Do you know anything about us?" And she was actually asking like a whole group of kids that had gathered around her, and I was like, I do. I didn't tell her. I just spent 45 minutes on their Wikipedia page, but she's like, well, tell me what you know. And I just ratted off everything that I had just learned about. And she looks at my resume and she's like, here's my email. And she's like, you go into your junior year with a 3.5 or higher GPA, you're going to generate a lot of discussion. And from that, it was like, I had literally just been, I just quit my construction job, right? I'd just done the Army. For those of you who don't know, I actually dropped out of high school. So I was a GED. I did a couple of college classes in the Army. And now this lady from SpaceX is telling me that if I try hard and get a 3.5 GPA, I could actually work in space exploration. And that just blew my mind. And I walked out of there on a mission. I was going to get at least I was going to graduate with a 3.5 or higher. And every year I was going to email them. And then I actually managed to get an internship while going to college to NASA, which ended up panning out really well and getting the job at Mission Control. But yeah, I didn't even think I could even dream to get a job like that until that lady did that at that science or that career fair.
That's kind of amazing. You did say you dropped out of high school and got a GED. Is that one of the major challenges you face going into a career like this?
The biggest challenge there was actually getting into college from there. So there's a lot of challenges for me in high school. I actually grew up with a single mom that kind of struggled with a lot of addictions and things like that. And so I actually started living on my own for the first time at 15, paying my own bill. My cousin, who's like my brother growing up, he was 18 at the time, so he could sign for an apartment. So we literally roommated a fair amount throughout high school. I'd occasionally try to move in. I really liked playing sports growing up, and but when you're trying to pay your bills and stuff, so I tried to like move in with my mom for a little while if I thought things were stable enough for me to go to do some sports or whatever, and not have to work. And then sometimes it'd pan out, sometimes I wouldn't, move back out and pay my own bills and stuff like that. So that's actually why I ended up dropping out. And it was halfway through my senior year. And the only reason why I dropped out was back then. Well, first off, I was trying to pay my own bills, but also back then, all homeschool programs, there wasn't a distance diploma type of program for homeschoolers. So one of my good friends was homeschooled, and he's like, yeah, I'm taking my GED. And he was a year younger than me. He's like, yeah, I'm just going to move on and go to college. I was like, what? You can do that? He's like, yeah, homeschool, that's what we do. We get our GED. So I was like, what am I doing, man? I'm paying my own bills right now, working, trying to keep my car was broke down. I was literally living in Wyoming in the wintertime, riding my bike to high school and back, and then all over town in the winter, and then riding it also to work so I could pay my bills and stuff half the time. That was probably one of the biggest challenges and all that.
It's a crazy thing that a lot of people just don't know. Even scientists like yourself and people who work at NASA do have these struggles, and you guys made it past them. And is everybody ready to go into our next round? All right, we need 4 more people to join in. So if we can get everybody in, we should be good to go. And if we do not have people join in right away, you can always join right back if you'd like to play another round. So we need 2 more people. Be old, they could be new. At this point, we're just ready to play. So if you'd like to join us here for our next round, you're surely allowed to. All right, we got 10 people. Let's go in for another round. And a lot like we said, there's a lot of different things that happen. And like over here in O2, after you clean up the leaves in the vent, you do have to get rid of your trash. And a lot of times there is space trash out and just floating around. Earth has a massive field of different debris in space based on different satellites and other things we throw out, which is a nice thing to happen. So if you ever have an issue, just make sure to throw your trash in space. Or if we can, we clean it up better. So that way we can still fly things in and out a little bit. Or here in electrical, a lot of times you have to have power power to divert from somewhere, which is pretty simple. Or over here in communications, a major part of what happens is entirely based around communication.
Four people down. So, electrical.
It looks like we had a comment from Jamie. Were you having a hard time hearing me, Jamie, or somebody else? Is my I guess on the streams I'm just curious if my voice is coming through loud and clear enough.
And after our first round of voting, we're back at it. And as I was saying, a lot of times communication is the most important part of any process. Even in any field, if you can communicate, you're more likely to get along with other things. And it's also very helpful if you communicate clearly. You can get farther in life, better opportunities in jobs, and help out management. It's a great thing to learn on an early age, and it'll help you a lot in future life.
What were you saying would help you a lot in future life?
Just good
Say-
communication skills.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh,
Back and
man,
forth.
that's
It'll
crazy.
help you in any career.
So actually, interesting. Oh, never mind. We lost.
Well, good game, guys. That was very well played by both of you. And maybe we can get some more people in for the next round. All right. Well, communications. Would one of our other leaders like to talk about that a little bit?
I can do medical because I wrote that one.
All right. Would you like to read communications for us also? We can go through these things a little bit together.
Yeah. All right. One fun fact is that spacesuits used to have headphones in it's called the Snoopy cab that they wear, and a boom mic in front of their face. It was problematic, unfortunately, so I think they stopped using them.
And then you can continue on into our medical, and we have a few more questions for Ryan if he's willing to answer.
All right. Doctors that attend to a flight crew, they're called flight surgeons. These flight surgeons oversee the health of the crew before, during, and after the mission. Flight surgeons have specialty training and are board certified in aerospace medicine as well as another specialty such as family medicine or neurology. The extensive requirement means that most surgeons train for 12 to 14 years to be able to help. They also have to stay up to date with current technology and procedures. And then my question for Ryan is that being in a zero gravity environment like space can have disastrous effects on the human body, such as space sickness, osteoporosis, and muscle atrophy, all of which can be long term. Knowing that, would you be interested in going to space?
That's a really good question because just about everybody goes to NASA and goes to my job, with that in mind as a potential career path. Hey, we were working in mission control. We'd be great candidates for being astronauts. And I'll tell you, a lot of people, after working the job and seeing every day, because every day, one of my job's responsibilities was actually running all the cameras that were inside and outside the space station. And so I'd have to set them up and so we can monitor all the science experiments and particularly all the ones that the astronauts are doing. And I don't think I would want to, not at this time in my life, maybe when I was young, but if I didn't have any family, maybe. But the things that the astronauts have to go through, it's intense. And essentially they are sacrificing their health and their bodies for the name of human spaceflight, because for the rest of their lives, they're going to have all sorts of complications and problems caused by being up there, especially the ones that are there for a long period of time.
Yeah, it doesn't sound fun.
Yeah, but that view though, I don't know if you guys have ever YouTubed some of the awesome videos that they can put out from the astronauts' footage, because they'll actually put up in really, really nice cameras and time lapse them out the cupola, which is like the window for the space station, overnight and everything. And it's insane, the view that they get and the perspective that they get from doing the job. So.
Well, Ryan, we do have a couple more questions. How does the USGS use satellites to support their mission, and what is your role there?
Okay, so when I was working in the like I said, I have a 3-year-old now and everything. So, and a lot of my family's from South Dakota and Wyoming area, and we wanted to raise our son around family. And there's just something about this part of the country. I've lived a lot of places all over the world with my military time and stuff, and the people, there's just a really strong mutual respect across the board, or the level is much higher in this part of the country than a lot of places that I've been. And I really wanted to raise my son in that type of environment. The other states are great and everything, but my wife and I are away from all family and everything, didn't really enjoy the Houston area as much. And we loved the outdoors too. And so we wanted to come back to this part of the country. And I thought I was going to have to leave aerospace entirely, that field, and was looking for all kinds of things. Almost took a veterans advisor job at a college in Wyoming, because for me, it's not about the money. Life, it's not really about a prestigious job or money. And so to me, I was okay with that. And but then one of my friends that I worked with told me about, hey, the government's running this satellite program out of South Dakota. I was like, what? I've lived in South Dakota, a lot of my life. I've never heard of this before. And they pointed me towards the AROS data center, Earth Resources Observation and Science data center. And we're flying a Landsat satellite program out of here. So right now there's 2 satellites up in the air, Landsat 7 and Landsat 8. And next year we're supposed to launch Landsat 9 as the new one. And all Landsat satellites do is take constant imagery from all different bands. So visual band and then the other ultraviolet bands and all things like that, gathering as much planetary data as humanly possible. And then we just deliver that to the scientific community freely. So the entire scientific community around the world can access that data and do as much analysis as they want to come to conclusions on global warming, or whether it's erosion, oceaneering type stuff. And so what I do is I manage the ground stations network for the Landsat program. So we use ground stations there's one in Australia, there's one up at the North Pole, there's one in Alaska. We have one here in South Dakota at the AROS data center itself. And I just try to make sure that we maintain that coverage that both satellites need in order to keep the data coming down and the data going to the scientists.
That is great, Ryan. And did you kind of do certain things similar or different at NASA?
There's a few similarities. So one, just having an operational mindset is really important. So a lot of time when you go get an engineering degree, it's really easy to get embedded into the details of all the deep engineering knowledge. And sometimes it's harder for people to bounce back out to the bigger picture. And that's just such an important thing. And so here, as the Landsat ground systems manager, ground station manager. If getting into the details of what's going on in one ground station may not be that important when you can just literally just start taking passes at a different ground station if you want to. And so that's a really big aspect of it, is just being able to think operationally and not really get into the engineering weeds is a big part of it. Another part is antennas. So another part of my responsibilities for the International Space Station was maintaining our communication link to the satellites, because International Space Station communication with the ground essentially pretty much always goes through a satellite. So we're pretty much always pointing towards a satellite, and then that satellite relays our communication back and forth. And my responsibility was the antennas and that link to that satellite. And so we had all sorts of antennas that were gimbaled, and all the mechanics and the antenna theory that goes into that kind of comes into play when you're dealing with ground stations also in their antennas. So that's helped quite a bit.
That's quite an interesting concept, using different satellites bouncing things off. And we'll segue back into our next round. We'll start here, and then we'll see what happens. And since we have all 10 people already, why don't we get into it? And like Ryan was getting at, you kind of see how we have our stuff here. And we don't quite have satellites on this map, but there are other maps. And it's a great way to bounce things off mostly of each other. How he tries and gather more information is a major part of science too. If you wanted to go into any field, if you gather more information, it's best for all. A lot like this COVID mess going on right now.
So I think I got kicked out of the game, but that's okay, because I can go back to what I was about to say at the end of the last game, which you're talking about communication skills and how important that is in the job. And I worked with a lot of really smart people going through the crazy intensive training to become a flight controller. And communication skills was actually the hardest thing for people to get through in that training.
I believe it. Communication is a major part in doing anything at all. You're going to have to work with other people and communicate back and forth, and you're going to have to communicate with professors, teachers, anything. If you get good at those early, it's going to help you a lot later in life. And we do have our first death, sadly. So we'll have to go into a little bit more detective skills here, which is also very important about communication, which we are trying to exhibit here.
So since I'm not in the game, if anybody has any other questions from any of the platforms, I could probably answer them.
Yeah, if you have any questions at all, please just ask Randy. He'll be free to answer, I'm sure. And the more interactive we are, the more things we can continue doing like this.
I do have a quick question for you, Ryan.
Okay.
It sounds like you have a lot of responsibilities, and I was wondering what your favorite part of the job is.
My favorite part of the job is taking care of people, for sure. So it's I work with a lot of really good, hardworking people, and it's a manager's job to give them what they need to succeed, both so that they don't burn themselves out as well as succeed in their job. So when you have really good, hardworking people that are willing to bend over backwards to get the job done, it's a big part of the job as a manager to help them be able to manage that with their personal life.
Mm.
A lot of people don't really see like management positions as a position of servitude, but really that's what it is. Like your whole job as a manager is to make sure that the people that work for you have everything that they need to be successful in that job as a person. And that was really something that the military really drove in really hard. That's their whole mentality, is you set up the people that work for you for success, both on the battlefield, but then also as a person. And I just try to carry that forward in other professions.
Were there any other skills that your military background provided for you for this NASA job?
So for the NASA job, 100%. So the ability to quickly and effectively analyze really complex situations and just go with, not just freeze up, but go with, it may not be the absolute best solution in the end, but sometimes time doesn't give you the ability to figure out the perfect solution. And that's where a lot of really good engineers can get their heads wrapped around trying to overanalyze it, when sometimes you just have to go with the information that you have and make decision and go forward with it. And if in the middle of it you realize there's a better one and you can implement it quickly and effectively, then sure. But that was a really big aspect of it that carried over from the military, was just being able to, in really intense situations and really stressful situations, the adrenaline, you can just totally feel the adrenaline flowing through you while you're doing it, and maintain your cool, keep your quick and effective communication skills up so that you can communicate with the whole team what's happening and what they need to know, and get the risks out to like the astronauts if something's happening that puts them in danger and things like that. So
Ryan, you did mention quite a bit about high pressure situations. Are those common things you experience at NASA?
every week, all the time. So when you're going through training, it's 1.5 to 2 years of training to become certified as a flight controller. And that whole time is the first, I'd say 8 months is nothing but you're in a class. You'll take a class that lasts for maybe 3 hours on a system. And then you'll have like maybe 3 hours of study, and then you take a test on it. And then that's literally every single day. And you just get information just absolutely shoved down your throat for about 8 months. And then you step into these simulations, which are essentially all day. You have your setup. It's like just like a mission control room. You step in, you sit down at your seat, and there's a whole nother team of like 30 other people in another building that run the simulation model of the space station. And everything to you looks exactly like it would for the International Space Station in real life. And you get all sorts of failures in your systems happening. And there's a flight controller or a flight director in charge of the room. And it's usually the same flight directors that are in charge of the International Space Station for real shifts. And they're observing you. There's probably 40 people listening in and ready to critique every little word that comes out of your mouth. And at the end of it, you debrief for 30 minutes to an hour, and you go through those at least like once a week. And half the time they're so intense. Their goal is to make it the most stressful and intense day that the International Space Station has ever experienced. And that's every single simulation that you do. So literally, I would maybe get 2 minutes to take a pee in a 9-hour simulation sometimes. I mean, I would bring a liquid lunch, like a protein drink or something like that, because good luck trying to get anything eaten. And it was just intense. I'm stood up, I'm hitting, like pounding like a 5-hour energy or something like that while I'm at it, and just 100 miles an hour trying to keep the space station flying and the astronauts alive, the simulated ones. But then they'd actually have real astronauts sometimes making the calls in the simulations also. So you're working with real astronauts. And so if you screw something up in a simulation, yes, it's just a simulation and it's not real life, but your reputation as a flight controller for the astronaut's perspective, if you get like put an astronaut in danger on accident or something like that, and then also the flight director who's in charge of the whole room on shifts in real time, it is intense and stressful, and it's all the time, every week. And that's not even talking about the real time shifts.
Dang, that's kind of crazy. And back to the food. We'll have Jacob segue into it. What about food in space? Is it different, or is it just the same?
Well, here's some facts I can talk about food. Dehydrated, freeze-dried, and bite-sized food are coated with gelatin or oil to prevent crumbling were introduced during the Gemini project. Freeze-dried foods are prepared by quick freezing cooked items, which are then placed in a vacuum chamber where they are heated to remove all water. A freeze-dried meal would be rehydrated using a water gun to inject cold water into the package. After cutting the package open with scissors, the meal was ready to eat. Devin, got anything about energy?
Yeah, so obviously, if you're talking about a spaceship, energy is going to be an extremely important thing. You need to have power to run the ship's systems. I think they're going for in this particular thing. I think their, I guess, setting is that the ship is run by a nuclear reactor. I know currently a lot of ships and space missions in the International Space Station are run by solar power panels, but I know nuclear power is something that NASA's getting ready to look at a lot more in depth. It might turn out to be a really great source of power for longer missions simply because it doesn't rely on the sun, so you can go a lot farther away. And it's also uh, I mean, because of that too, you don't have to worry about like cloudy days or anything. That nuclear decay is fairly constant, so it provides a pretty uh, reliable source of power for missions.
Well, Devin, thank you very much. And Ryan, we have one more question for you until our final round. What advice do you give middle school and high school students for pursuing a STEM career?
Middle school and high school kids pursuing a STEM career. I would say don't let other people don't let yourself be the limiting factor of pursuing what you want to accomplish. So a great example is how I got my job at NASA, actually, my internship. I had my freshman year, right as I started, I'd only been a student for like 2 months when that SpaceX thing happened, right? But then the next year, I wrote SpaceX, hey, have a 4.0 GPA, and didn't hear a word back. And I was like, okay, maybe I can't actually do this. And then the South Dakota Space Grant Consortium. So it's a group that gets a bunch of money from NASA for education purposes, and then they get to decide how they want to spend it. And South Dakota loves to spend theirs on internships. And I saw an email come out to School of Mines students, and it said, hey, you have a week to get an application in. We have an opportunity for and this was like literally in December at the end of the semester. It was, you would leave in January and you would go to Houston, NASA Johnson Space Center for an internship. You have a week to get your application in, and it's an extremely intensive application process. You have to get like letters of recommendations from faculty and your professors and everything like that. And I was married with my wife. We had a cat. We were renting an apartment in Rapid City. I mean, I had all these reasons, and I didn't think I was probably going to be able to get the job anyways. High school dropout, Army kid, why would they want me? And so I had all these excuses and reasons why I wasn't good enough, and why it wouldn't work, and why I couldn't make it happen. And I just kind of fell back to that mentality, like, no, I'm not going to get in the way of myself. I'm going to do everything I can, and then make people that get paid to decide whether I'm good enough do their job and tell me I'm not good enough. I'm not going to be the one getting in my way. So I busted my butt and got, thankfully, a couple of the professors that I'd visited with a few times, on the side, and got to know them a little bit. So they were actually willing to give me letters of recommendation pretty early on, and not knowing me all that well yet, and got the application process. And next thing I knew, my wife and I were moving to Houston on an internship for a semester. And it puts you back a semester in college. I mean, I was like 26 or 27 years old. I didn't want to set my graduation back in another 6 months. So there's so many excuses why to not do it. And I just didn't want to put myself in the way. And so if you're serious about wanting to accomplish something, go all in, and don't get in your own way. Don't psych yourself out and think you're not good enough or that you can't do it. Do it. Just chase it. And if you reach your end of your capabilities, great. You learn what you're capable of. But and that's something to be proud of. Not very many people go out and actually realize their potential. A lot of people go the easy road and they don't push themselves. And it's okay to reach that limit. Like, I was really, really close. I barely, even though people told me I was really good at the flight controller job, I felt like it was the absolute limit of my capabilities as a person. And I felt like I was at the edge of failure all the time. And that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to push myself to reach my potential as a person in life. And that's what it's all about. And so, and if I had failed at something much lower, that's okay with me. You know, it's not about reaching the huge prestigious job and all that. It's about being true to yourself and reaching your potential and being happy with who you are and what you've accomplished for yourself with what skill set you were given in this life. And that's kind of what it boils down to, in my opinion.
Well, that is great advice to a lot of kids out there who don't know what they're doing yet. And we'll get into our last round with some final wrap-up questions. And Ryan, if you would like to join us, the code is ready for you. Or if you would enjoy, we can also have you to speak to a lot of people outside too.
Yeah, must have put the code in wrong here. I'll see if I can get in here. I guess it's not letting me in, but that's okay. Yeah, I don't mind visiting and stuff. Maybe those people have some questions.
All right. Well, we'll get our last game in then, and we'll have you guys, if you have any questions at all for Ryan, just go ahead and ask in the chat, and he'll answer as many as possible as we finish our final game. And thank you for coming. It's been great so far. Ryan, I do have to ask, because communications is not really a big part in this game, but it's big in a lot of other aspects. What are the major difficulties in communicating in your field?
So one of the most difficult parts, and it comes back to that whole engineering mindset again, because everybody I worked with was an engineer first. They got an engineering degree, and it's really easy to get. And then you go into that 8 months of technical knowledge where it's just intensive training, followed by tests, followed by training, and you're just cramming your brain full of all this technical knowledge. That once you actually step into those simulations, people have a really hard time when you get put in a stressful situation, and it's critical that you are able to capture the main points of what's happening in your system and quickly and effectively communicate those to the team so that they can go and do what they need to do and respond to it in their systems. That is a huge sticking point for a lot of people. You have to be able to quickly and concisely kind of paraphrase what's going on and put yourself in the other people's shoes. They don't want to hear about, like the computers were part of my subsystems. And so they don't want to know that a bit got flipped that's causing a sensor to kind of go off. They don't care about all that minor details. They just want to know that, oh crap, the sensor that's saying that the oxygen is low, it's faulty. That's all they care about. They don't care about the super low level details of why it's like that. So, and that was a really hard thing for a lot of engineering focused type of people to really be able to accomplish.
So the hard part would more be to explain the important details in a concise manner, but not going overboard on everything they don't really need to know.
Yep. So my first job outside of training in the Army, actually, my first permanent duty station was in Seattle, and my first boss, I was a private, and he would treat me like a private, and he made me stand at parade rest when I talked to him and everything, and he'd send me off on a duty on a task, and then when I was done with it, I'd come and report to him, and I'd have to knock on the door perfectly and everything, and he'd be like, "Are you ready to come in and report to me?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." And I'd come in. He's like, "Quick, concise, to the point, go." And it's the second I started stuttering or anything like that, he's like, "Push-ups, go." He's like, "Let me know when you're ready to try again." And then I'd sit and do a few push-ups. I'm like, "I'm ready, sir." "Okay, recover." And I'd stand up and I'd try again without any filler words or anything like that. So that was really exactly the mindset that you want. You don't want to sit there and waste any time talking that doesn't need to be wasted, and you don't want to use filler words as much as you can. You just want to get your point across quickly and effectively.
So this applies to other fields too, right? For those of you who've taken high school speech or things like that, to be concise and just speak out clearly and effectively would probably be the best thing you can do in most situations. And Ryan is a great example on hard work and concise information is an amazing thing. Especially if you're trying to get work done. And you can apply it to other things in your life too. So Ryan, I do have to ask, is stabilization a major thing in dealing with other space exploration?
Is what's that? Stabilization, as I said?
Stabilization, like trying to keep things in a certain orientation.
You mean like orientation is in like the spacecraft being oriented properly?
Yeah.
100% critical because we had a failure somewhat recently on one of the Landsat satellites actually that caused it to not be able to determine its own orientation, and because of that it couldn't properly point its solar arrays towards the sun to maximize its power. And thanks to that, we were actually in a pretty precarious situation where the batteries were discharging more than they were charging. And had that maintained, the batteries would have died, and we could have potentially, lost the spacecraft in that type of situation. And it was all because it didn't know how it was oriented, and we couldn't get it to point properly, to point its solar arrays towards the sun properly. So it's absolutely critical.
What would happen if a spacecraft like that would lose connection and we no longer had any control over it? Does it just fall back to Earth, or does it just sit up there in space?
Well, there's a lot of things that would happen before really it got to that point. Every spacecraft that I've worked with, they will it'll automatically detect different levels of power, and when it reaches certain levels, it'll automatically shut off everything. It's called like load sheds. It'll shed everything that's not critical, every single power drawing thing on it. And the International Space Station is exactly the same. As you start getting into bad power situations, maybe a solar array, we did these in simulations all the time. Solar arrays having issues or something like that, and the power generation's at risk. The space station will automatically, the software will start responding and start safing itself. And every spacecraft I've worked with has those types of safings in it to buy you a lot of time to work with. And they'll go into like safe modes, and some of safe modes get to the point where you actually will lose communication with it for a while. And it's all about buying it as much time as you can so that doesn't happen. Now, if it was to end up reaching that point, I don't know. I would assume it would become a piece of space debris at some point. Once you get through all those safing situations, and if literally nothing else works and no type of forced reboot type things or anything, then I think you just have a piece of space debris at that point.
This has all been very informational, and we thank you a lot for coming. We have a few more announcements. One, if you are a high school senior at the Sanford Research Facility in Leeds, South Dakota, is accepting applications for their summer intern program. The deadline is January 29th, but if you can, go see the link in our chat and maybe apply. It'd be great fun. And thank you for our South Dakota Discovery Center for helping us host this and do many great things and allowing many internships and other ideas or things we can do, such as robotic building with the Lego robotics, and even our program here. They support us in many ways, and it'd be great if you could support them too. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you've had fun tonight.
Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
It's been great. It's been a lot of fun. Maybe we can do this again sometime. More questions, more fun. It'll be great.